All right, let's go to the Lord in prayer before we get started. Lord, I pray that you'll be with the services this morning. I pray that you'll bless them. I pray that you'll especially have your way in the preaching service this morning. I pray that you bring some lost in this morning. I pray that you'll give them strong conviction. I pray that your word and your name will be magnified this morning. I pray that you'll do a work on our hearts. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Revelation chapter 5, and we are in we're going to start with verse 6 this morning. Revelation 5:6. And I beheld, and lo, in the midst of the throne, of the four beasts, and in the midst of the elders, stood a lamb as it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God, sent forth into all the earth. So he's presenting himself as the lamb. Now notice you have the lion and the lamb here. In verse 5 you have behold the lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David. And then in Revelation 6, he is a lamb. He comes the first time, he comes as a lamb that has been slain. Me and Brother Selchek, we went out door knocking in St. Ignatius Monday. I went to pick up Brother Selchek. I got all my flyers out. I told him, just hang doors. Don't waste your time getting in no arguments with somebody that just wants to argue. Well, what I do, I find them arguing with somebody. Sometimes the preachers can't resist. This guy, he was talking about a religion called Baha'i or something. A follower of, what is it?
Baha'i. There are a lot of them.
Baha'i? I'd never heard of it before.
They believe Jesus came 3 times already since the...
Yeah. Well, that sounds like it. Like, this guy's messed up. I encouraged him to read it. But he was saying Jesus Christ came again. I said, that ain't Jesus Christ. That's a false Christ. That's an antichrist. Brother Selchek was arguing with him. I was going to end the argument. I said, what you're believing is unbiblical. That's an antichrist. When he comes back the second time, he's going to reign as a king. He says, that's what they thought about him the first time. He says, you don't understand the difference between the first coming and the second coming. I said, when he comes the second time, there will be no arguments. He's going to reveal himself for who he is, and it doesn't matter what man thinks about him on the second coming. I said, he hasn't come the second time. There's only 2 comings. I guess they think that he's doomed to repeat the first coming over and over and over again. Is the way it sounded. But the first coming, you got both presentations of them to do 2 different ways. And it's interesting, verse 5, it shows the second coming first. He comes as a lion in the second coming. There's nothing meek and lowly about him on the second coming. Second coming comes in His wrath. He comes with authority. He comes to reign. He's the king on the second coming. The first coming, He came as a lamb ready to be slain. Alright, so that you have the 2 comings there in the verse. As it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes. The 7 horns, don't know. I don't know what those are. Don't know what they represent. Can't really give anything intelligent on them. Okay, now 7 eyes I can give you something on. But the 7 horns, there's got to be a reason for it. Just don't know what. And I like to point stuff out to you like that. Well, maybe you can do some study and figure it out. There's things in that book that we don't understand, and maybe the Lord will reveal it to somebody. That 7 horns, there's going to be a significance for that. You don't have a lamb with 7 horns. So if it says a lamb with 7 horns had been slain having 7 horns, there's a reason for it. God does things in 7s. Them horns have to represent something. It's just what it is. Haven't figured that one out. But let's look at the 7 eyes. The 7 eyes will be we got a little bit on those. Turn to Zechariah chapter 3. Zechariah chapter 3. And let's look at the 7 eyes. I get suspicious of a preacher that never has to say he doesn't know. I mean, if he's got an explanation for everything, sometimes I think he's bluffing. Zechariah chapter 3, verse 9. For behold, the stone that I have laid before Joshua upon one stone shall be 7 eyes. Behold, I will engrave the graving thereof, saith the Lord of hosts, and I will remove the iniquity of the land in one day. So once again we have the phrase 7 eyes. And that's the only other time you see it. That thing is not going to be a coincidence. Go back up to verse 8. It says, Hear now, O Joshua the high priest, thou and thy fellows that sit before thee, for they are men wondered at. For behold, I will bring forth my servant, the branch. And if you notice on that branch, it's capitalized on all the letters. That is a reference to Jesus Christ coming in the millennium. And then following that, it says, For my servant the branch, for behold, the stone that I have laid before Joshua upon one stone shall be 7 eyes. So it's kind of like a foundational stone that has 7 eyes. The stone that I have laid before Joshua upon one stone shall be 7 eyes. Behold, I will engrave the gravings thereof, saith the Lord of hosts, and I will remove the iniquity of the land in one day. And that day, saith the Lord of hosts, shall ye call every man his neighbor under the vine and under the fig tree. In one day. Now that one day, that's going to be the second advent. When He sets up His kingdom, He comes back and one day He sets it up. So that foundational stone, them 7 eyes, has to come do with the coming of the Lord on that when He comes back. So both references here, you got a lamb that has 7 eyes. That 7 eyes is connected with the Lord. It's also connected with the 7 spirits of the Lord. Now, let's look at some other verses. Turn to Zechariah chapter 4 while we're here in Zechariah and look at verse 10. For who hath despised the day of small things? For they shall rejoice and shall see the plummet in the hands of Zerubbabel with those 7. They are the eyes of the Lord which run to and fro through the whole earth. So these eyes of the Lord, what do? It says they go out through the whole earth. They go out and they're watching through the whole earth. It says 7. It says they run to and fro. Just like the spirits. The 7 go out through the whole earth. The eyes of the Lord has to do with 7 eyes of the Lord, and they go out and they're watching. That has to do with watching through the entire earth. And it has to do with setting the earth up and Him reigning in the entire earth. Now look at 2 Chronicles chapter 16. Go to 2 Chronicles chapter 16. The Bible says, The eyes of the Lord are in every place, beholding the evil and the good. 2 Chronicles 16:9. 2 Chronicles 16:9. For the eyes of the Lord run. Here you go. This running. Just like with Zerubbabel and Ezekiel. The eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth to show Himself strong in the behalf of them whose heart is perfect toward Him. Herein thou hast done foolishly, therefore from henceforth thou shalt have wars. So the eyes of the Lord were active way back in the time of Asa. It's active in the time of Ezekiel, and it'll be active in the time of Revelation, which they're active now. What are they doing? They're going out throughout the earth to find certain individuals. And who's He looking for? He's looking for those who the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth to show Himself strong in the behalf of them whose heart is perfect toward Him. So what does that have to do? Them eyes of the Lord, they're running around through the earth to find out where He can be magnified, where He's going to show Himself strong. And what He's going to do in the millennium, in the Revelation, He's going to show Himself strong. The Lamb has 7 eyes. 7 eyes and 7 horns. So the eyes are connected with the Lord looking upon man throughout the earth. It's His omnipresence, inspecting, looking at the saints to show Himself strong to show Himself in His strength. Now that's the connection with it. Look at Proverbs chapter 15. Proverbs chapter 15. Proverbs chapter 15. All right, here's the verse I quoted. The eyes of the Lord are in every place, beholding the evil and the good. You can't get away from God's eyes. It describes us as having 7 eyes. There's no place that man cannot be seen by the Lord. That is Proverbs 15. Proverbs 15:3. So those are the 7 eyes, which are, now look, they're connected with, go back to Revelation 5:6. Having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent forth into all the earth. Now we already talked about the 7 spirits. So them 7 eyes are connected with the 7 spirits. Now exactly what the 7 horns is, I couldn't really come up with anything on them 7 horns. Maybe you can. There's got to be a significance there. There's probably some cross-references on it. You just got to find them. Revelation chapter 5 verse 7. And He came and He took the book out of the right hand of Him that sat upon the throne. And when He had taken the book, the 4 beasts and 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, having every one of them harps and golden vials full of odors, which are the prayers of the saints. Now these odors, which are the prayers of the saints, throughout the Bible, that's what the incense that's offered on the altar represents. It represents the prayers of the saints. And you're going to find incense offered on the altar as a sacrifice of prayers. And you're going to find prayers and incense connected all through the Bible. Let me give you some references that show you how incense and prayers are connected. Go to Psalms chapter 141. So your prayers to the Lord is like a sweet smell coming up to Him. And it's an incense and it's a sacrifice. And the Lord wants you to take time to offer incense to Him. And He wants to smell that sweet smell and savor coming up to Him. Alright, incense. Look at Psalms 141. Psalms 141. And pick up verse 2. Psalms 141, verse 2. Let my prayers be set forth before Thee as incense, and the lifting up of my hands as the evening sacrifice. You say it's a sacrifice to prayer? Yes, it is. You know, how often do you take time to pray? Yeah, it's a sacrifice. And the Lord looks at it as a sacrifice of incense. It's a prayer, it's a sweet smell. You know what the Lord wants? He wants you to take time to talk to Him. You know what you have to do? You have to make the time. You know, what do we say many times when we want to talk to someone? You got a moment or do you got time? What? For somebody to talk to you, they got to make the time to talk to you. What? Is your day's busy? You know what we'll do many times? We'll never make the time to talk to the Lord. It's a sweet incense to Him. He wants to smell the prayers of the saints. Look at Luke chapter 1. Luke chapter 1. The incense was part of the temple worship and the tabernacle worship. It was set up to take and offer incense. Now look at it being practiced in Luke chapter 1, and look how it's connected with the prayers. Luke chapter 1, and look at, I want to pick up verse 9. Luke 1:9. According to the custom of the priest's office, his lot was to burn incense when he went into the temple of the Lord. Look at verse 10. And the whole multitude of the people were praying without at the time of incense. So they'd gather together and pray. When they were praying, the high priest would go in and he'd offer the altar. On the altar of incense, he'd make the sacrifice of incense while the people were praying. So the two are connected together. Now turn your Bible to Revelation chapter 8. Revelation chapter 8. Revelation chapter 8. Look at verse 3. Revelation chapter 8, verse 3. And another angel came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer, and there was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of the saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. In the third heaven, there's a tabernacle and altar up there, and on that altar, when the saints are praying to represent it, that angel is offering an offering of incense to the Lord. And the two are connected together. So your prayers are a sacrifice. You know, as a Christian, you're supposed to do what? You're supposed to make sacrifices. Why? Because you're a holy priesthood. Look at 1 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 2. To serve the Lord and to worship the Lord, it's going to require sacrifice on your part. Look at 1 Peter chapter 2. Look at verse 5. Ye also as lively stones are built up a spiritual house, a holy what? Priesthood, to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God by Jesus Christ. So there's a number, you know what the Christian life is? It's a sacrifice life. It's a sacrifice life. It's one that you sacrifice it to the Lord. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your body, what? A living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto the Lord, which is your reasonable service. Amen? So, I mean, there's many sacrifices you can give to the Lord. How many of you know what the different sacrifices you can give to the Lord? What are things you sacrifice to the Lord? You sacrifice your body, you keep it holy and acceptable. You sacrifice your will. That's a good one. Praise. Sacrifice of praises. There's a verse on that. Sacrifice of praise. Your singing. That's what your singing is, a sacrifice. You say, how is that? Well, anybody that hears my singing, they're sacrificing. That's a sacrifice. Okay. Time. Sacrifice your time. Prayer is a sacrifice. Incense. You give your time to the Lord, that's a sacrifice. You know what you also have to sacrifice? Worldly goods. Giving is a sacrifice. Offerings is a sacrifice. Family. Sacrifice your family. You know, you taking what was Abraham asked to sacrifice? His son. Now, did the Lord actually let him physically sacrifice his son? No. But what was the purpose of the sacrifice of Isaac? What was the purpose? It's a typology, but what was the test of? He was obedient, yes, but it was more than that. What was he testing? If he loved the Lord more than his son. If he loved the Lord more than his son. It's a test of love. Who do you love more? For you to sacrifice your family, you have to love the Lord more than your family. There's a verse back in Luke, I think it's Luke, where it talks about, it's one of the most difficult passages for a guy to accept. And it says, he that hateth not mother and father and son and daughter more than me is not worthy of me. How many of you know the reference I'm referring to? Now, are you supposed to go around as a Christian hating your family? No. No. That's not what it's talking about. What's it talking about? It's talking about if you love the Lord the way that you should, your family is going to feel like you hate them because you've neglected them and put Him first. You put Him first instead of putting them first. That's what the verse is referring to. It's not telling you go hate your family. It's telling you love the Lord enough where He's always first and they're not. The one you love the most is the one you put first. All right. Let's liken that to the first commandment. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. You know what's a God that you put before the Lord? Anything you put before the Lord is a God. Many times the Bible will refer to tear down the idols in your heart. It's the things that you've put first in your heart above the Lord. The Lord won't take second place. He shouldn't have to. So those are spiritual sacrifices. It's not the easiest thing to do. It's not the easiest thing to do for you. All right, let's go back to Revelation chapter 5. So that has to do with the incense being full of odors, which are the prayers of the saints. Prayers is a sacrifice. Take time to pray. The song said, "Sweet hour of prayer, sweet hour of prayer." That's a sweet incense to the Lord. It's a sweet hour of prayer. Do you take an hour of prayer? You say an hour every day? Well, you may not be able to take an hour every day, but can you take an hour in a week? Say, I want to take 1 hour this week to pray. I want to take time to pray. Now, you can pray without ceasing, amen. You always should be praying to the Lord and talk, but how often do you take time to set aside to just pray? I'm not talking about praying while you're working, praying while you're driving, praying while you're out walking around. And I mean, that's instant in prayer. I mean, the quick prayers that you throw up to the Lord all the time. I mean, that's what it means to pray without ceasing. But how often do you take time to set where you block everything out? This is my time of prayer. And you just spent the time in prayer. Many a times with me, it's at night, right before I go to sleep. I go to sleep trying to pray to the Lord. I'll start praying for people. And my wife, she used to tell me, I always wake up in the middle of the night, so that's when I pray. So her time was 2 and 3. I had to deal with that last night. I think it was last night. Did I tell you last night I woke up between 2 and it was between 2 and 4. I was wide awake. You say, did you pray? No, I just thought about stuff. I should have prayed to put myself back to sleep. That's the time to pray. Actually, flip the light on and try to read your Bible, then you'll be like, He giveth His beloved sleep. But I mean, sweet, take a time to pray. And I make it practical for people. I don't think people are going to take and start praying an hour every day. And if you can, do it. Daniel did. He took time to pray 3 times a day. He took the time to pray. Now, that's a sacrifice to take it. But try this. Take 1 hour. 1 hour this week where you spend an hour in prayer. Spend an hour in prayer. And just pick a time in the week. Say, okay, this day I have that time I want to set aside to pray. And you'll find it's a challenge. For you to do it, you're going to have to sacrifice. You're going to have to make a sacrifice. All right, let's go back to Revelation. Revelation chapter 5, verse 9. And they sung a new song, saying, Thou art worthy to take the book, and to open the seals thereof. For Thou wast slain, and hast redeemed us to God by Thy blood, out of every kindred, tongue, people, and nations. This group is redeemed by His blood. Amen? So this is the blood of the Lamb. They're saved by the blood of the Lamb. Look at 1 Peter chapter 1. 1 Peter chapter 1. Look at verse 18 and 19. For as much as ye know that ye were not redeemed with corruptible things as silver and gold from your vain conversations received by the traditions from your fathers, but with the precious blood of Christ as of a lamb without blemish and without spot. So you're redeemed by the blood of Christ. It says we've been redeemed by Thy blood out of every kindred and tongue and people and nations. So are these that are talking in verse 9 Jews? I would say no. This one's going to be a Gentile. Now notice these are in heaven. They are saying this, and what is fixing to happen? Well, what's fixing to happen is an account of the 7 vials, which is the account of the tribulation. So these individuals are already in heaven before tribulation starts. And that's why they're the 4 and 20 elders. I connect them They got to be either Old Testament saints or they got to be connected with the Gentiles that are saved, which would connect them with the church age somehow. Don't know exactly who they are, but they're in heaven before the tribulation starts. And it's not just them. Look down at look at 10 and 11. And has made us our God, king and priest, which we'll talk about in a minute. And we shall reign on the earth. And I beheld and heard the voice of many angels round about the throne and the beast and the elders. And the number of them was 10,000s times 10,000s and thousands of thousands. It's not just the 24 elders that's around the throne, redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. There's thousands and thousands and 10,000s upon 10,000s. You say, what is that? Well, that's all your Old Testament saints that went up. The sins of the past were taken away by the blood of the Lamb. They were redeemed from the earth by the blood of the Lamb, and the church age. Those all the saints from back here up to this point, sitting around the throne before that tribulation starts. Yes?
So those are all the people that were in captivity, that he led captive.
Yeah. Well, I believe that the Old Testament saints are up there also. They'll come back with them. The reason being is because the sins, when He dies on the cross, He leads them out of paradise. And you do have somewhat of a resurrection there. Many of the bodies of the Old Testament saints arose and were seen of many, right?
Yeah, but they said that when He preached
to the souls in prison.
Right, aren't those all of the Old Testament saints that didn't, other than Enoch and Elijah? Yes.
Yes. That would be all Old Testament saints. The souls in prison may be a little bit more than just the saints, though. That one could have been everybody down in hell.
Anybody that lived with a clear conscience.
Yeah. That one could have been more than just the saints. But when they're forgiven, where are they forgiven at? And this is something we can't fully understand. Everybody back here is forgiven and redeemed. Because the bloods of bulls and goats would cover the sins, but they wouldn't take them away. Amen? So they were in Abraham's bosom, where Lazarus is, place of rest, and then they come out, and He leads captivity captive. He leads them out. That's the sins of the past. But He also covers all the sins of the future. With God, there's no time. All sins are forgiven at the cross and covered and taken away for everybody that's going to get saved in the future. And that's not just the church age. That's going to be anybody here. Their sins are forgiven by the blood of the Lamb. Now they receive that forgiveness a different way. It's faith and works and obedience. This guy's sins will be forgiven. Any sin that's forgiven was forgiven here. That's where it's forgiven. That's where it's covered. That's where it's taken away. He's not going to be sacrificed again for future sins. It's taken care of. And for us, it's a little difficult to understand because we're not eternal. With us, everything's time. With God, He looks at time as already done, taken care of. He's eternal. He can look back at the events of 2020 as already passed. We're not there yet. For us, that's future. For Him, it's past. It's already passed. And that's something you ain't never going to comprehend. That's God's way of looking at things. Yes.
Now, you say the tens of thousands in verse 11 include everything up through...
I would say it's everybody up to the second advent. Beginning of tribulation. Beginning of tribulation. I said second advent. That would be incorrect. Because right now what you're seeing is an event in heaven that's taking place right before the seven seals start being opened. The seven seals are the accounts in the tribulation. So this group is in heaven before the tribulation starts.
I think when we say Old Testament saints, it's not necessarily all Jews, though it predominantly probably is.
It doesn't have... you have saints in the Old Testament that are Gentiles too. And that's the Jews were a peculiar people to present God, the true God, to the world. Now, what would the point of that be if the world wasn't getting saved? Amen? So, when a guy recognized the God of Israel as being the one true God, if he was a Gentile, he was saved as a Gentile in the Old Testament. The perfect example of that for one under the law would be Naaman. Naaman. And when he gets saved, the leper to get saved, he says, I recognize the God of Israel as the one true God. Rahab and Joshua. Ruth. These are all Gentiles. Let's go back before the law. Job. Well, before Abraham, all the saints were Gentiles. There was no Jew till Abraham. He's your first Hebrew. He's your first Jew. Does that mean that there wasn't people that were saved and forgiven? Sure there was. It's just a different dispensation, different way of dealing with it. The Gentiles were different. Okay, here's one. Under Jonah, the whole town of Nineveh. Those weren't Jews, yet they were forgiven. Why? Because they repented and put sackcloth and ashes. And even the animals. There's one. You want a revival? Let the dogs and the donkeys get saved. There's a joke. There's a preacher and he was a retread preacher. My brother told this joke. This guy went to this revival meeting, and when he come back, my brother asked him, he goes, how was the revival meeting? He says, it was great. The song leader, the piano player, 3 deacons, and half the church got saved and their dogs. That's but it's just a joke on retread and them. That's with Nineveh. That's about the way it was. The whole town gets saved. Now, were those Gentiles? They were Gentiles. Those weren't Jews. Why? Because they believed on the God of, and repentant with the God of Israel. So God's merciful. If a man was a Gentile and he was righteous and would accept Him as God in the Old Testament, He'd save them. He'd save them. He saved them. You have Gentiles in the Old Testament that were saved. Huh? The thief on the cross. Well, that one's a different case altogether. Okay, was he in the church age? Was he in the Old Testament? I'd make him the church age. He dies after Christ.
He went to paradise and didn't go to that.
Well, there you go. But paradise is with the Lord.
Yeah.
So, he's... That one right there is a dispensational nightmare. We've made the 8th dispensation, the thing on the cross. Yeah. Sung a new song. Go to verse 9. What is the new song, though? And they sung a new song, saying, Thou art worthy to take the book and open the seals thereof, for Thou wast slain and hast redeemed us to God by Thy blood out of every kindred, tongue, people, and nation. All right, what's that a new song from?
For being able to open the book. Nobody else would open the book.
No. But it's a song about them being redeemed. I make the group the church. Overall, the group's going to be mostly church age. What's another song in the Old Testament? Because you're pointing something out. Song of Moses. What does that song have to do with?
Deliverance from Pharaoh.
Yeah, by keeping the commandments of Moses. That's the Old Testament. Now, in the tribulation, what two songs are going to be sung? Give me the reference where, and they sung the song of Moses and of the Lamb. Brother Mike, do you know where that reference is in Revelation? That should be later in the book of Revelation. And I think it's in 15, 16, or 17 back in here. Revelation. Yes, that's it. Revelation 15:3. Go back up. Let's get the context. I saw another angel. All right, we're going to get into some dispensation stuff here. This is a sidetrack, but she gave me this thought when she mentioned it's a new song. Look at verse 1. And I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having the 7 last plagues. I put these at the end of the tribulation here. 7 last plagues, for in them is filled up the wrath of God. And I saw as it were a sea of glass mingled with fire, and them that had gotten the victory over the beast. So who's going to be singing this song? It's going to be those that got victory over the beast. This is a tribulation saint. And over his image, and over his mark, and over the number of his name, stand on the sea of glass, having the harps of God. And they sing the song of what? Moses. That's not a new song. The servant of God and the song of the Lamb. 2 different songs. Okay, you got a song back in Deuteronomy. It's called the Song of Moses. It's toward the end. It's referred to as the Song of Moses. It has to do with God's deliverance for them if they keep His commandments and are righteous. That's under the law. Now, here you have a new song. This song is sung by a great multitude before the tribulation starts. And it's what? Yet thou hast redeemed us by the blood of the Lamb. There's the song of the Lamb. This guy, he has to sing both songs. Faith and works. Alright? Now do you see that? I can't say it 100%, but you say it's a new song. Well, maybe the new song is the blood of the Lamb. Have to do with the blood of the Lamb. I ain't 100%. I have to go back and study that. That thought just crossed my mind when you said that. Yes.
The Song of Moses being sung in heaven by
Tribulation saints.
would that not have something to do with the sea after them coming when they leave Earth? They have to pass through the sea to get to heaven. That God.
Well, that's a picture of the crossing of the Red Sea and doing that. So, but I don't know how far I can take that one. Dr. Ruckman taught something on that thing. I ain't going to say that he is wrong. I don't know. I can't teach it because I can't see it clear enough. But he had that tribulation saint. I'll give you what he gave. And you can study it out, try to figure that thing out yourself. I remember him doing this once. And some of the things he taught, I'm not going to teach his doctrine because maybe the Lord showed him something. I can't teach it quite yet. He had that tribulation saint being raptured out. He had that devil coming after that tribulation saint and chasing him through the deep. And then he has war in heaven and that guy being cast out, and he was making the tribulation rapture a mid-trib rapture of the tribulation saint. I don't know about all that. I can't quite put that together. But he likened what you just said, Pharaoh chasing the children of Israel through the Red Sea and then being slain as a type of that. That was a type. Huh?
Does that mean that the sea of there is?
Well, who's Pharaoh look like? He's a type of the devil. Alright. It's the Jews leaving the world. Tribulation saints, that's going to be mainly a Jewish rapture. Leaving the world. And then that dragon chasing. So the type is strong. It's a strong type. But you don't want to teach a doctrine on a type. You prove the doctrine with the type. You don't teach the doctrine on type. I will not say that thing, there ain't something to it. There's too much there to say there's not something to. But I don't fully understand it where I'm going to teach that thing as a doctrinal truth. Because, it does look like there's a certain amount of them. I think it's the 144,000 Jews that are raptured before the middle when He sits down, which would put there being actually 2 raptures in the tribulation. And that's the idea of the pre-rapture. Whereas people get that idea and they try to put it on the church, and they say you're going to go through the tribulation and be raptured pre-wrath. Well, and that's how you come up with the doctrine of the rapture being in the middle of the tribulation. And that's what that guy down there in Arizona does. Huh? They're under works. It's a Jewish thing. They're under works. They're in the tribulation. But what is everybody redeemed and their sins forgiven them? Even the Jews. The blood of the Lamb. So both songs have to apply. So when you get somebody faith in Christ and works, he sings both songs. He sings the song of Moses and the blood of the Lamb. Now, does the song of Moses apply to you? In no way, shape, or form does it apply to you. You don't sing the song of Moses. What song would you sing? Your song is going to be similar to this one that we're seeing in Revelation chapter 5. With this great multitude that was redeemed from every kindred and race and nation. 2 different songs. But this guy later that comes out of the tribulation, he sings both songs. He sings them both. I know that's getting a little bit, you're putting a lot of stuff together there, but there very likely is a connection with that new song having to do with the blood of the Lamb. Being redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. New song. I guess we'll close there with the new song. I was actually planning on getting through verse 12, but we'll do that next week. We'll stop with verse 10 and we'll look at kings and priests next week.